What is up, team? Welcome to this class on Dante's Inferno. Technically, we're recording this on January 19th. Our first class was this last Monday, but I failed to record the first half of class. So now I am recording this solo episode to walk you through the first canto. We got to the beginning of canto 2 when I started pressing record. So class 1. We'll pick up the beginning of Canto 2, but in the meantime, want to make sure that for those that were unable to attend on Monday, that I give you the context leading up to Class 1 for those of you that want to catch up. So as a reminder, the version I'm going to be walking through is the Anthony Esolen version of Dante's Inferno. It's got the Italian on one side and it's got the English on the other side, which is why I love it. Not to mention he's just got fantastic footnotes. So a little bit of background on Dante's Inferno and Dante Alighieri in general, and the Inferno specifically, which is what we're talking about. So the Inferno is part of the first part of a 3-book series called Dante's Divine Comedy, or just the Divine Comedy. So the first part is the Inferno, the second part is Purgatory, and the third part is Paradise. So just as a general, kind of set the table, what the Inferno attempts to do is it sort of provides this education on the proper order of the cosmos and of the human heart. Because what Dante did when he sort of scaled the 9 circles of hell, is he did that both as kind of a personal exercise. He wanted to arrange things hierarchically, give everything in order, understand sort of the priority and how he, as a medieval man, could view the world. One thing just to note on the medieval mind in general is they didn't see themselves as the center of the universe in like a geocentric sense. They saw themselves as the bottom of the universe. So they viewed it hierarchically. So when they were looking up at the heavens and they were looking up at the stars, they were looking up, they weren't looking out. So today, when we look at the stars, we say we look out at the stars. But the medieval mind, of which Dante was one, tended to see it as looking up. And what were they looking up at? So if you could think about a triangle here, they're sort of looking at, for Christians like Dante, what they were looking up at was the pinnacle peak, the apex was God. If you go back to Aristotle or Plato, they might, use a somewhat more secular language and say that they're looking at the end of all things. Or Plato, if you go back to Plato's Allegory of Decay, it's like it's when you finally look at the sun that represents the highest good, the pinnacle of all things, the end of everything. That Aristotle would call it telos. So that's sort of how medieval man thought of themselves, and it allowed them to arrange their lives and their psyche hierarchically, in the sense that the more they saw themselves sort of stretching upward toward that eternal thing beyond time, that's different than the transient nature of things on earth, the more they sort of saw themselves elevating as a human being. So we have to kind of understand that in the context of the Dante's Inferno, because if you look up a picture of Dante's Inferno, and there's one in the outline that I provide, it is an inversion of Paradise. So if we view Paradise as this triangle, and you have to flip that 180, and then you can view the Inferno as something like an inverted triangle, sort of leads further and further away from the top, the hierarchy, that Paradise, God. That's when we get to the bottom of the Inferno, we're going to meet Satan as the being that's fixed furthest away from God. Understanding that, you can kind of understand just as an overview, sort of how Dante structures his universe in the Inferno. As a little bit of just historical background, or just a couple other pieces of context, is there are 2 things to think about here. There's Dante, the poet, who's the one who wrote the book, and then there's Dante, the character. So Dante writes himself into his story and is the main character that moves through this journey. And so it's always a question of to what extent Dante, the man, believed or thought the things that Dante, the character, says or does. And that's the tension we're going to have to hold as we move through this course. But just in terms of context on Dante, the poet, right around the time when Dante lived and worked, there was a civil war in Florence, Italy. And Dante was kind of on the verge of some huge political power, becoming one of the 6 magistrates of Florence. And but he kind of upset some of the powers that be, and he ended up getting thrown into exile for 15 years. And so in 1306, he starts working on the Divine Comedy while he's in exile. And so, you can think about it as one of those weird situations where at the time, there's a decent amount of evidence to suggest that Dante, he was famous at the time, so he got taken care of, but he, it's still not a fun thing to lose everything you worked for, lose prestige, and all sort of these accolades, especially if you, putting in a lot of work to kind of gain it. So Dante loses a lot of, the titles, whatever. He loses a lot of that. And so you would be understandably sort of upset. But at the end of the day, there's a chance that the Divine Comedy never gets written had Dante never been exiled. So in this weird sort of way, this tragedy suffered by Dante becomes this tremendous triumph because it gives us this epic poem that we still have today. So the other little bit, just before we sort of move into Canto 1, that I want to offer is just something to keep in mind. I guess two other things. Before the Divine Comedy, comedy nowadays, when we think about comedy, we think about like ha funny. But traditionally, in the traditional sense, we have all the Greek tragedies from ancient Greece. That was most of poetry. And a tragedy refers to effectively a sad ending. Comedy refers to a happy ending. So as part of this trilogy that ends in Dante ascending to paradise, it has this sort of blessed, positive ending. So that's why it's called a comedy. Last little piece of context is there's something called the rule of retribution at work in Dante's Inferno and in Purgatory. So to understand this, it's this idea, the rule of retribution says that the punishments we see in the Inferno are Dante's view of poetic justice. Basically, it's his way of trying to have the punishments fit the crime. So in Italian, contrapposta is the word. And it just refers to this idea that what the sinners or the people that we see in the Inferno, what they did in life, they become in death. That'll make sense as we see more and more of them. So, for instance, when we come to the ring of the people who claim to be seers, their heads are flipped, turned on backwards, so that they claim to be able to be far-seeing in life. And so in death, they're in a twist of fate, an irony. Their punishment is that their heads are turned, and so they can't see forward at all. That's just one example, but that rule is at work in all of the levels, the circles of hell. So it's an important thing to keep in mind as we move through these various circles. Pay attention to the punishments and think about intentionally what you think that might symbolize, or why you think that particular punishment is given to a particular sort of band of people. We see this, biblically. It's in this sentiment. It sort of was playing out when you think about eternal justice. Eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. That's in Exodus. In the apocryphal wisdom of Solomon, and the line is, by what things a man sinneth, by the same he is tormented. So this is the idea that's at work in Dante. Now, with that sort of background in mind, that context, what we're going to do is we're going to move into Canto 1. So I'm gonna have some of it in outline, but I'm gonna read the words kind of directly from the book. So the very first words are arguably the most iconic of them all. And it starts, midway upon the journey of life, I found myself in a dark wilderness where I had wandered from the straight and true. So he finds himself in a dark forest. He's awakening. He's somebody that's going to survive this event where he's been exiled. He's feeling a little lost. He's feeling a little disoriented. Nowadays we might refer to something like this experience as the midlife crisis or a dark night of the soul. And it's that period that many of us, all of us, probably at some point in our lives come to, where our previous worldview, we lose a relationship, we lose something, and all of a sudden the scales fall from our eyes, and we're sort of forced to question where we are in life and where we want to head. Maybe some very vital piece that was holding our foundation up previously has given way, and we feel like maybe we're in a little bit of a free fall. And so that's what this dark forest represents here, is this state of chaos and disorientation that Dante is waking up. Dante, the character, is waking up into. So he continues, how hard a thing it is to tell about, that wilderness so savage, dense, and harsh. Even to think of it renews my fear. It is so bitter, death is hardly more. But to reveal the good that came to me, I shall relate the other things I saw. So this is to reveal the good that came to me. What Dante is saying here is he's like, hey, we're on our way to paradise, but in order to tell you of paradise, we first have to go through the other things. I have to relate the other things I saw. So that means he's got to tell us about the Inferno, and he's going to tell us about Purgatory first. And so what we have here is, Dante wakes up. He's sort of in this dark forest. And then what we find is he sort of peers out of the forest, and he sees this, what he calls the wandering light of heaven, sun, or something off in the far distance that sort of he can ping he can get his bearings based off of, and it gives him a direction to start heading. So he starts heading that direction. And then we move on into lines 31 through 49 of Canto 1. And this is where Dante's in the dark forest, starts moving forward, and all of a sudden he's confronted. He's confronted by three animals that no longer, they kind of get in his way in his path. There's a leopard, a lion, and a she-wolf. And they kind of all step in. So a lot of scholars will associate the leopard, lion, and she-wolf with different vices. And so it's kind of symbolic of this idea that Dante has this realization of, he's in this dark forest. He wants to get out of it. He wants to go towards this wandering light, towards the sun, towards this high thing. But he can't do it on his own because these animals' vices get in his way. So he needs some help. So as he's sort of in this state and needs a little bit of help, that's when we see Virgil comes in. So Virgil is the guide of Dante. Virgil wrote a poem called the Aeneid. Dante obviously is very influenced by the Aeneid. So there's Aeneas is the hero of the Aeneid, and his main thing he's famous for is founding Rome in Italy after the fall of Troy. So he was in the Trojan War, was a member of the defeated Trojans. Then he escaped on a ship and took sort of these refugees on this long journey that in many ways was similar to that of Odysseus from ancient Greece. And then they founded Rome, this great Rome. And Dante loves Virgil. So in line 82, when Dante is kind of stumbling around, he sees these animals, and all of a sudden this mysterious figure sort of comes out of the woods. Dante says, "Then are you?" This is line 79. Sorry. "Then are you Virgil? In that spring swelling into so rich a stream of verse." I answered him, my forehead full of shame. And then at this point, Dante is a big fan. So he says, "Honor and light of every poet, may my long study avail me in the love that made me search the volume of your work. You are my teacher, my authority. You alone are the one from whom I took the style, whose loveliness has honored me. See there the beast that makes me turn aside. Save me from her, O man, renowned and wise. She sets the pulses trembling in my veins." "It is another journey you must take," replied the poet when he saw me weep. "If you wish to escape this savage place, because this beast that makes you cry for help never lets any pass along her way, but checks his path until she takes his life. So vicious is her nature, so ill bent. She never snuffs her ravenous will enough, but after feeding hungers all the more." So what Virgil is confirming here is Dante can't make this trip alone. If he wants to be saved, he needs to rely on Virgil. But he also says, it's another trip you must make. So what he's referring to here is you got to go all the way to paradise. Now, what we don't know yet, but we'll eventually learn, we're not going to learn in this class because we're only covering the Inferno, is that Virgil is what's known, or what Dante would call a virtuous pagan. So he didn't know Christ, so he doesn't have the full revelation of Christ, so he can't enter paradise. He can only take Dante as far as the Inferno and then Purgatorio. So when Virgil is telling Dante, it's another journey you must take, what he's referring to it there is this idea that his ultimate aim and end is going to be to reach paradise and sort of see the path to blessedness and what that looks like. So that's what he's referencing. Now so before we go into Canto 2, so how Virgil kind of ends this is he says, hey, I'm here to save you. I'm here to help. You got to follow me. We got this journey we got to go on. And so he ends, line 112. He says, and so I judge it would be best for you to follow me, and I will be your guide, leading you out through an eternal place where you will hear the groans of hopeless men. So Virgil's going to give us an overview of this entire journey Dante is about to go on. So when he says, leading you out through an eternal place where you will hear the groans of hopeless men, will look upon the sorrowing souls of old, crying in torment for a second death. He's referring to an hell here. Then you will look upon the souls content to wait in fire. So then you will look on the souls content to wait in fire because they hope someday to come among the nation of the blessed. So this is referring to part 2 of the Divine Comedy, which is Purgatory. And then he's saying, should you then wish to rise and go to them, another soul will come worthier than I. With her I'll leave you when you go my way. For that great emperor who reigns above, because I was a rebel to his law, will not allow me entry to his realm. A few things here. So I already mentioned to you, there's this progression from Inferno to Purgatory to Paradise. And so when he's talking about Paradise, he's saying, should you wish to rise and go to them, another soul. So another soul here, who's referring to that, there's a Dante's love in life is a woman by the name of Beatrice. So Beatrice, it is said, is the reason that Dante even wrote the Divine Comedy in the first place. Dante had he'd written a previous love poem, then he vowed to write the best love poem ever in honor of Beatrice once she passed. So who he will meet in paradise, Beatrice is his muse. She is the highest one flung him forward. And we'll see a few times where Virgil will invoke Beatrice's image in order to inspire Dante to continue making the journey. So he's introducing that here. Another soul will come to you worthier than I, and I'll leave you when I go my way. With her, I'll leave you when you go my way. And then Virgil says, for that great emperor who reigns above, because I was a rebel to his law, will not allow me entry to his realm. So this is another theme, again, going back to what we were touched on in the overview, where so the great emperor, obviously Virgil is referring to God here, and he said, because I was a rebel to his law. Well, you could say, what the question is whether was he a rebel or was it just, Virgil sort of existed right around that time when Christ was around, but was he truly a rebel to his law, or was it one of those things where, he just wasn't, they weren't on the same page, or maybe Christ was so new. So there's a little bit of like, I don't know that rebel to his law. He wasn't a rebel to his law in the same way that, say Satan is. As we'll find, Virgil was in limbo. So clearly he was in a space where all the virtuous pagans, basically the best you were allowed to get, the best place you were allowed to be if you didn't have the benefit of Christian revelation. In Dante's mind is this limbo territory that we'll see before we enter the true rings of hell, and that's where a lot of the great masters of the ancient Greek and Roman world, where Dante places them. So we'll see them. So the from that point on, then Virgil says, "Lead me now to the place you tell me of." Or sorry, this is Dante. "Lead me now to the place you tell me of, so I may see St. Peter's gate and those you say are dwelling in such misery." He sped on, and I held my pace behind. So we're leaving the dark forest now, and we're starting to make our way toward hell. So that's where Canto 2 picks up. Canto 2 is all about Dante's doubts when he is about to enter hell. And Virgil tells, again, this is her first instance of Virgil telling Dante, hey, Beatrice, your love, the one who's waiting for you at the end of this journey, she's the one that sent me to you. So I want you to this is why we're making this journey. Dante's doubting his worthiness. He's like, I don't know if I can do this. And that's when we get to probably my favorite lines of the Inferno. There might be a little bit of overlap with class 1, but I want to make sure that I cover this specifically because I think there's a ton of meaning here. So they make their way out of the wilderness and they're starting to approach the gates of hell. Dante's having doubts. This is line 31 of Canto 2. So he says, "But I, who grants my coming, and for what? I'm not Aeneas, I'm not St. Paul. No one, not I myself, could think me worthy. So I should enter on this quest. I fear it would be mad and foolish. But you're wise. You understand more than my words can say. And as a man who unwills what he wills, changing his plan for every little thought till he withdraws from any kind of start, so did I turn my mind on that dark verge, for thinking ate away my enterprise, so prompt in the beginning to set forth. If I have understood your words aright, replied the shade of that great-hearted man." So this is what Virgil is saying in response to Dante. "If I have understood your words aright," replied the shade of that great-hearted man, "your spirit has been bruised by cowardice, which many a time so weighs a man's heart down, it turns him from a glorious enterprise. The shadows fool the horse that shies away." So if you're like me, this is an experience common to everybody. We started a new enterprise, we started a new endeavor, a new project, something we're super excited about. And then we come to what's known as sort of the valley of disappointment or valley of Lewis talks about that. This in the Screw Tape letters, or one of the things that Screw Tape tells his nephew, the junior demon, Wormtail, is, hey, you got to work hard on people after that initial enthusiasm that initial enthusiasm wears off, because you'll get them to abandon their projects if you really hammer that doubt. And so often we recognize this. Thinking eats away our enterprise. We start something new. We start to lose energy. We start to lose excitement. We start to settle in sort of the monotony and a mundane nature of the everyday tasks it takes to make progress in an area. Or maybe we're not seeing progress as fast enough as we want to. And so we started thinking about it. And then this is when, as a man who unwills what he wills, changing his plan for every little thought till he withdraws from any kind of start. So this is what happens to us. We start maybe not to have the success we want. It doesn't happen as fast. And then all of a sudden, our thinking makes us abandon it. And we start something new. And then we just repeat this cycle over and over and over again, where we never give something a long enough time. We never make it through that valley of disappointment to see what we all know is kind of like the hockey stick. So the tradition, like the idea of this is you have this initial sort of burst of enthusiasm, then you enter into these long, slow days. You don't know when the upward swing is going to come again. And so you just get worn out and you get worn down. Your will gets worn down. But what Virgil is saying to Dante here is he doesn't mince words. He doesn't hold anything back. But he's saying, if I had understood your words right, your spirit has been bruised by cowardice. So, which many a time so weighs a man's heart down, it turns him from a glorious enterprise. As shadows fool the horse that shies away. As shadows fool the horse that shies away. An important thing to hyperlink to here is there's a Roman Stoic Seneca. He's got a line that a lot of folks know, and it says, "We suffer more in imagination than reality." And so what Virgil is trying to say here is he's like, we're about to go on this journey, and before this journey even begins, you're imagining a lot of things that are about to meet you. You're imagining that you're not strong enough to withstand what you don't even know about. So you're projecting these images of these monsters you haven't even met yet. And you're self-rejecting yourself from this journey. Who grants my coming, and for what? He says, I'm not Aeneas, I'm not St. Paul. Who am I to take this? There's all of these things that I don't have the power to confront and overcome. So that's what Dante is saying. And then Virgil sort of slaps him in the face with his words and basically brings him back to hell. I'm gonna pause there. I believe that this is where the class picks up. If not, I apologize, but I think that is the intro and everything that you need to pick up with class 1. If you want to join, I will send me your email. Everybody else in the class has received an outline that they're allowed to annotate and take notes for themselves. Just as a reminder, we're meeting for 6 weeks every Monday, 6 to 7 p.m. Central Time. and there's a nice little crew of us. We'll walk through each of the cantos, and then I have some reflection questions that we kind of talk about and discuss a little bit, and it's a good time. I'll leave you with this reflection question, which came up in our first class, and I think it's a good one to think about. And this is the idea of, so we met in Canto 1. Virgil comes to Dante when Dante's in the dark forest, and he helps. He's a teacher, he's a guide, he's an anchor point for Dante when he's feeling lost. One thing I want you guys to think about is, who is that person for you? If you were lost in a dark forest, if you were disoriented, who would be your Virgil? If you were writing a poem about your life, who would be the person that comes to you to help guide you on a journey, recenter you, reorient you, reground you, so you can start building your life back up? Who would that person be? Something to think about. And if you feel led, maybe answer that question in the YouTube comments. Let's get a discussion going. Otherwise, we will be in touch, and I will see you all soon. Peace.